get my attention, and I'll start speaking a little bit more loudly. And thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really happy to be here. I actually, I didn't go here for school, but I remember coming here many times in the summer for the youth orchestra program. I would come here every summer. We'd drive out here from Washington, D.C. So I really love the university a lot, and I'm glad I was able to come out here and talk to you guys. As he said, I'm actually the CEO of OB1, which is a startup company, and OpenBazaar is a project that I started. The company works on that project and does a few other things, and I'll explain that a little bit later. I know it's a little confusing, but OpenBazaar is basically our is the thing that we're mostly known for. Today's format is supposed to be around 2 hours. I don't think I've ever spoken that much about blockchain before somebody said shut up. So I'm going to hopefully we can make this kind of interactive. If you guys have questions at any point in time, just raise your hand. We could talk about it. Or if there's something that I don't get to that you'd like to talk about in relation to blockchain, Bitcoin, crypto, tokens, whatever, I'm open to that as well. So let's get started. So how many of you guys are like, I mean, this is a stupid question with this group probably, but how many of you are familiar with Bitcoin? Okay, yeah. Well, it's basically what I expected. How often do you guys use cryptocurrencies? Would you say, who's used a cryptocurrency for something in the last year?
Wait, define cryptocurrency. Are we talking about like general debit card, credit card transactions, or are we talking about like Groupon or something like that? Or?
No, I'm just talking about straight up like you had Bitcoin or Ether or some token, digital token, and you did something with it. You spent it, sent it to somebody, used it on an app, anything. Has anybody used it in the last year? Okay, how about in the last month? Last week? Okay, so we still got a long ways to go, huh? Who here has ever heard of OpenBazaar? Okay, wow, actually a few. That's cool. It's when I was in Shanghai, actually, that was like the highest rate. I didn't even know they knew what we were, and like everybody raised their hand. It's always interesting to see who has heard of us. Who here has actually used a decentralized application of any type? Okay, there's a little bit of overlap there. Okay, who's ever tried to work on one? Okay, all right. Great. So, so it seems like there's still a small percentage of the room, even in the engineering group, that it has actually played around with any of this technology. I'm hoping that that trend changes. I've been working in this space since 2012. As you can see, OpenBazaar is empowering anyone, anywhere to buy and sell anything freely. And we use the word freely as like a double entendre. Free as in you're free to do whatever you like. You're free to run your business however you want to. And then free as in the sense that it's actually costs nothing to use. It's a completely neutral protocol, very much like the internet. There's no fees involved in using it. So I have a Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science from James Madison University. I attempted 2 other master's programs, a computer science master's and an MBA degree. I didn't finish the computer science one because I ended up traveling a lot and I just didn't get around to it. I was busy doing hands-on work when I probably should have been studying a little bit more. But, and then I also did an MBA program at Johns Hopkins, which I did not finish, with 1 semester left because I thought I'd never become CEO, and I didn't really understand why I was paying so much money to get it. But then I became a CEO like a year later, so you never know. Get your degree. I've spent over 10 years in government and commercial security consulting, cybersecurity consulting. Right out of college, I went to work for Booz Allen Hamilton, which, if you don't know, that's where Edward Snowden worked before he was found out. I was there the day he got removed. It was really interesting seeing all this stuff get wiped out of the system in real time as the news was breaking. But I spent a lot of my time doing identity and access management type work. So back then, we were using very simple LDAP directories to track authentication to different applications. And then I got to see that just progress to these amazing systems that we were building later on for classified agencies. One example is we built a like an eye scanning service that could work up to 500 yards away. So if you put these systems in front of like a military base, as a vehicle is approaching, it can read everybody's eyes in the vehicle from up to 500 yards away, match it against an identity database, and know if there's like some unidentified individuals in there. Because a lot of times those cars will come up to gates, blow them up. This allows them to be much more prepared. So that's one type of system that we were building for the government. And other ones were encrypted messaging systems. So, figuring out ways to send very sensitive military data from one place to another securely over their networks. And then I also worked for some commercial clients like Neiman Marcus, Hilton Hotels, Boeing, FedEx, all kinds of different cybersecurity things, like basically doing audits on their systems, writing connections between mainframes and different things. But regardless to say, over those 10 years, I learned a lot about encryption and threats, security threats to businesses, different types of businesses. And through that work, I began to get familiar with Bitcoin because a lot of the technologies overlapped. So the government has a massive public key infrastructure database, over a million identities all in one massive database, and they manage the revocation of those credentials and all that stuff centrally. But Bitcoin was the first time we really kind of saw this infrastructure be completely decentralized, right? Like there's no one person managing that entire architecture. You control your keys. Whoever holds the key, that's the identity. It's not really tied to a person necessarily. So what is OpenBazaar in relation to this? Okay, so Wikipedia, we'll just use them since they're probably a better authority than me, right? OpenBazaar is an open source project developing a protocol for e-commerce transactions in a fully decentralized marketplace. Who here can tell me what decentralization is? Anybody want to give me a definition?
It's basically trustless. You have a network of nodes, for example, and everybody can exchange with each other without the use of an arbiter or a mediator, something like that.
Yeah, so that's an example of decentralization similar to the context of OpenBazaar, right? Like being able to exchange something of value in return for some other piece of value and not relying on some kind of third party to get involved, right? So like when you send a Venmo transaction, Venmo is the third party, right? They facilitate the transaction for you. With crypto and decentralized systems, you can send value without a third party. It goes from me to you. It's just like digital cash, right? It's just like handing you a dollar bill. You now have it. No one else helped us with that interaction. Decentralization is a spectrum. It's not a clear, concise thing. You can look at just about anything that claims to be decentralized and poke at places where it might not be completely decentralized. If you take the example of Bitcoin, in terms of decentralization, one could argue that the individuals that are mining on the network have a very large control over the network. And that could be a centralizing factor, right? And there's like plenty of other threats like that. So when it comes to decentralization, we're always trying to achieve more and more decentralization. And I'll explain a little bit why in a few more slides. OpenBazaar also uses cryptocurrencies as a medium of exchange, and it was inspired by a hackathon project called Dark Market. So in 2009, obviously, Satoshi, if you know your Bitcoin history, he created the white paper for Bitcoin, outlined how these trustless transactions could occur. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend doing so. It's not that long. I think it's like 4 pages, and it's super concise and explains exactly what almost every other crypto system is kind of building on top of fundamentally. So once Bitcoin came out, of course, technology is always, very frequently, the early adopters are shady characters, right? You notice that like pornography companies are the first to jump into virtual reality videos and 360 videos, or drug sales, they jump on Bitcoin, and it was no difference here. So in 2011, someone, we didn't know at the time, created this anonymous marketplace, and there was a lot of libertarian ideology underneath this that that enabled him to create this. But the principle was, let's just take eBay and we'll use this unstoppable cryptocurrency, and we'll just let people decide for themselves what they're going to sell. But unfortunately, with all centralized businesses, if you decide to do something illicit, you're always going to be at risk, right? So that's one huge mistake that he made, was assuming that he would be able to get away with this for a long time. In 2013, it was found out that Ross Ulbricht, he still thinks it's up in the air whether it was him or not, but he was convicted of running the Silk Road, starting the Silk Road. And the reason was because the entire website was being run on a centralized server in some data center in Iceland, I believe. And so once they found that, that was it. It was lights out for him. And so that is the exact opposite of a decentralized service. But that was in the fall of 2013. In the spring of 2014, a group of developers at the Toronto and Crypto We Trust hackathon from Airbits, which is now Edge Wallet, really great wallet if you guys want a crypto wallet, and the team from Dark Wallet, in 24 hours they created a concept called Dark Market, which is what OpenBazaar is built on top of. And the idea was, well, instead of having a centralized website for Silk Road, why don't we just build it on a peer-to-peer network like BitTorrent, and we'll use Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency, and we'll merge it all together with encryption, and we'll just create a marketplace that literally can't be shut down. If the marketplace is being run by 1 million peers, you'd have to shut down every one of the million peers in order to destroy the marketplace. So they actually were successful. They won the hackathon and won $20,000 for doing so. This is what it looked like. But it was not so much that it was not a very nice looking app, or that it was very simple. It was the idea that it was proving out, right? Like, no one had put that together, that those things could happen. It was built in 24 hours. They built their own custom peer-to-peer network using 0MQ. It created and managed all the Bitcoin transactions. It had encryption built in, and it had like this encrypted chat channel that was working on it for people to communicate on the platform. It pretty much emulated everything of a Silk Road, and they did it in 24 hours. So how did OpenBazaar happen? Well, the team that built Dark Market, they really only raised the money in order to fund Dark Wallet. And so they were not intending to move forward with Dark Market, but I thought it was like a really amazing idea, and not just for building a Silk Road, but I was thinking, like, what if we just expand this idea and we say, well, why are we limiting it to some illegal drugs or something? Like, why don't we just try to disintermediate Amazon with this thing? Like, could we take this technology and make it all e-commerce possible on here? Because a lot of those factors involved with decentralization are very valuable to other users, right? Like, can we bring them completely free transactions? Can we bring them more privacy, security, more resiliency, more global aspects to it? And so that was the idea behind OpenBazaar. So I basically asked them if I could help them work on it. They gave me the project, and I renamed it OpenBazaar, which is a little bit more positive connotation of, Dark Market, OpenBazaar. Mom and grandma probably don't want to be on Dark Market. OpenBazaar is a little bit nicer. But it also expresses the idea that it's, a bazaar is like a open marketplace, right? Like, people come to the bazaar, they meet in person, they socialize, they interact, and they do commerce personally. So we're trying to build like a digital version of a bazaar. And we immediately began working on a more advanced architecture that we felt would be scalable for the future. So this is what the fork looked like. It basically is the same thing, but it says OpenBazaar. And we began immediately soliciting help and getting feedback from the community. So, it started with a Reddit post asking for people to help out and start contributing ideas on how we can make it better. And the team just started growing and growing and growing, just from a simple GitHub repository and a subreddit. And these are some of the things that we started to build out. Ricardian contracts. Has anybody ever heard of Ricardian contracts? Probably not, right? Okay. So who's heard of smart contracts? Okay, a lot more people. So Ricardian contracts are kind of somewhere in between a traditional business contract and a smart contract. They're not really smart. In our case, it's a simple JSON structure. It just describes a contract, a recording contract. So the definition is basically that it's both human and machine readable. So when you look at the JSON structure, you should be able to clearly see who's involved in a trade, how much is it, what's being offered, blah, 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 like human readable. But the machines have to be able to interpret it for some protocol as well. So that was something that we pioneered. So we designed the contract structure using that. We built our own custom P2P networking layer. The prototype used a 0MQ implementation, which is not great for a huge peer-to-peer marketplace. And so we started rewriting all the code. If you've ever written peer-to-peer networking code, either with WebSockets or just traditional sockets, there's a lot of weirdness that can happen. Most of us are used to building websites or client server, right? Like there's a really easily accessible Amazon web server, and your web browser hits it, and everything is great. It's fast. There's caching and all that. But in a peer-to-peer network, especially a global peer-to-peer network, sort of like BitTorrent or any of these, you have so much diversity. You have people with slow connections in Africa. You have people on VPNs, multiple VPNs. You have people's home networks that are behind NATs and different kinds of firewall configurations. Now you want all the communication between all those different people to be super fast. I mean, imagine your supercomputer trying to buy something from the guy in Africa who's running it on his cell phone. Like these are the kinds of challenges we're trying to solve with peer-to-peer networking here. Super complex. Trustless payments, but with human dispute resolution. So one thing that we decided early on was that if we were going to do a marketplace, there would have to be some way to handle a dispute resolution, right? So within Bitcoin, there's this capability where multiple people can own a Bitcoin wallet, right? So if I want to send something to you, but I don't know you or trust you, what we can do is we can create a joint wallet. And then instead of paying you directly, I could put the money into the joint wallet, and then you have to send me the product I bought. And when I receive the product and I'm satisfied, then both of us will create a cryptographic signature to release that money to your own personal wallet. So we kind of use it as a bridge. That's how we get rid of the middleman. But the question arises, okay, you said you sent me something, I didn't get it. How do we get past that? Because there's two of us, we got to agree. Does anybody have any ideas how that could be done?
Are you talking about 2/3 escrow?
Yeah, so two of three escrow. So within Bitcoin, there's a scripting language. It's a pretty basic scripting language, but it allows things, multi-party wallets, like I said, and that's using 2 of 3 multisig in this situation. And what that means is that 3 people technically own the wallet, but in order to move any money in or any money out of it, 2 of the 3 parties have to agree. So in this case, if the buyer and the seller can't agree, we can bring in a third person to kind of help facilitate that, to break the difference. Now that's not the only way to do trustless transactions on cryptocurrencies. There's something called double deposit escrow, which is kind of a game theory thing where if let's say you're going to buy something from me, we both put money into the account. And so if we can't come to an agreement, we both lose money. So there's this game theory kind of situation where most likely both of you want to figure something out because you both are going to lose. In the original case, only one person has something to lose because you sent me a good and I got it and I'm happy, and then I just refuse to give you the money. So there creates an issue of contention there.
And the double deposit escrow, what happens if, well, I mean, where's the actual money stored? Is it on a server that that someone owns, or where?
No, well, see, this is one of the misunderstandings of Bitcoin. Is like the money doesn't really reside anywhere. It's really just keys, right? Like you hold keys, and the ledgers is just a database that everybody agrees to. So the money doesn't really go anywhere. It just is basically like, imagine there's a Dropbox that just exists and the money is in there and you guys both have the keys to go into it. So you have the keys personally. In this case, the double deposit escrow, you both hold the key to that box. Both of you have money in there. You have to agree before you unlock it together. That's basically how it is. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah. So the money's not really going anywhere. It's not in a bank account or anything. And then support multi-level privacy and anonymity. So people who use online commerce, their needs are very different. So if you're someone that's intensely private, we want to be able to support being anonymous and secure and completely private. And there are other people that want to be more public. So say like if Walmart started selling on it, like they're not like trying to hide their identity. They actually value their identity. People have an external trust for them already, so they don't need to operate that way. So there's a flexibility of that. So this is OpenBazaar 1.0. We rewrote it. It was written completely in Python. We got rid of the 0MQ and started building out a UDP-style peer-to-peer network. Well, we used 0MQ for a few things, but we started to remove it and write UDP-style network. Use something called RUDP. And then we started building out and expanding techniques to like get through those firewalls and things that we talked about.
Is the custom P2P network also written in Python?
It was written in Python too. Yep. And it's pretty amazing, but a lot of these libraries they just don't exist because beyond BitTorrent and maybe Skype at one time, people don't really use peer-to-peer networks that much. We really use just regular websites.
Sorry, Paul.
Okay.
What was the decision behind choosing Python over other programming languages?
That's a good question. It was arbitrary because the original hackathon project was written in Python, so we just continued. The one interesting aspect here was we tried to build a very basic decentralized search. So, like I said earlier, with a peer-to-peer network, all the peers being in different areas with different speeds, all the data that exists about the marketplace, all the listings, all the things for sale are spread across all these computers across the world, right, with different internet connections. And now you want to do decentralized search against that, but you don't want it centralized, right? So you don't want it centralized like Google, but you want it to be as performant as Google. Well, there's a reason why Google has so many data centers and like very efficient indexing algorithms and all this stuff, right, to provide that like millisecond response of results. Well, now you cannot do it that way. Now you still, in real time, have to go out to all those nodes and get that data, be able to index it, do searching against it, and provide meaningful results to users. It's nearly impossible. It's definitely a computer science problem that I think is going to challenge us for a long time. And I keep hoping we're going to find better ways to do this. But, and there's some promising projects out there in the space. But we tried to build one initially because we didn't want all this stuff to be on any of our computers. It didn't work out so well. And I'll explain kind of what we ended up doing as a compromise soon. We only accepted Bitcoin payments. Bitcoin was the only meaningful transaction volume back in 2015 and 2014. But it was super slow. The networking layer was super slow. The search was super slow. Everything was super slow. And it just was not acceptable. So we went back to the drawing board and we re-architected it for OpenBazaar 2.0. And we hooked up with a company called Protocol Labs. I don't know if anybody's heard of Protocol Labs, IPFS, or Filecoin. Okay, Filecoin. You guys have never heard of this, but in our space, it's pretty big. They raised $250 million in like 3 hours for Filecoin. So overnight, instantly, really huge. And they build a bunch of different libraries to support Filecoin. One called IPFS, which is Interplanetary File System, which is a decentralized distributed storage system. And libp2p is the networking library that they use in order to communicate across that network. And so instead of using our custom peer-to-peer network that we designed, we switched to libp2p in IPFS. And the great thing about that is that their company is like singularly focused on building peer-to-peer networking libraries. So they're much better equipped to do that. And a lot of Ethereum dApps and products in the space are starting to use IPFS. Cloudflare just had an announcement last week that they provide an IPFS gateway, which allows anybody building an IPFS app to have really quick access to that data. And just real quick, since you probably don't know what it is, IPFS is like, imagine it's almost like a distributed S3 storage, for like Amazon storage. So you can create a website and it can be completely, it gets cached across a peer-to-peer network. If your server goes down or your computer goes down, others can step up and portray the content. So let's say China wants to censor some web content and they shut down the web server. Well, this is so resilient because it can get the data from other places around the world, and so it creates almost like a censorship-free internet. This technology is being piloted at Mozilla for the Firefox browser to have native IPFS support. It's getting a lot of traction, so it's something that, if you're interested in that, I would definitely recommend reading up on that, checking it out. We moved away from decentralized search to centralized but federated search providers. So because the technology is not really there to provide truly decentralized search, what we've done is we allow anybody to create a search provider for OpenBazaar. And so you can think of it like BitTorrent. There's no like single search engine for BitTorrent, right? You have Pirate Bay, or you have other websites that they crawl the network, they index listings, they do all that independently, and they have different views of what's available on BitTorrent. Some of them don't have pirated content, some do, right? So in our case, it's very similar. This marketplace has, it has everything from drugs to, t-shirts. But a certain search provider may only want to focus on the content that they're legally allowed to present, and some don't care, but the choice is in the users. And so search providers can provide a different experience to people. And it doesn't even have to be as malicious as that. It could be like, hey, I want to build an Airbnb on top of OpenBazaar, so I'm going to filter out everything except for real estate listings. It could be simple like that. So it's a good compromise for us, and it's worked out really, really well. We now support Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, and Zcash. And we're building a new capability that will allow people to plug in any wallet, any token to buy and sell on OpenBazaar. And we completely rewrote it in Golang. So we went away from Python. Who here has worked a lot with Python or is familiar with it? Okay. Who's used Golang? Okay, less. All right. So Python is really, it's a great language. It's a great language. But there are some definite downsides to building desktop applications with Python. One thing, for instance, is cross-compiling across different operating systems. So we support many flavors of Linux and Windows and OS X. And so packaging the app easily and making it work properly across all the operating systems is super important. Python was just a hot mess when it came to that. Golang has some really beautiful cross-compiling capabilities, and it just has solved a lot of problems. We also built our own SPV wallet, which is like a light Bitcoin wallet that you could use in the application, and it was also written in Golang, and IPFS was also written in Golang, so we're like, we'll switch to Golang. But Golang has been really awesome. There's just so many advantages. This is not a Golang talk, but yeah, it's pretty awesome. So if you haven't looked into it, I would consider it. There's actually some work in the Golang space too that's they're building it so that you can convert Golang code into WebAssembly, which would run natively in the web, which would be really awesome. You get to take advantages of it being so fast and run it in the web too. So it's a very promising language. And then we improved the UI and the user experience. So go ahead.
You said as you move to Golang, so the peer-to-peer networking will now be using gRPC then?
No, it uses libp2p is what we use. Yeah. If you look up the libp2p, is there's so much documentation on how that works exactly, but.
Can you explain again, sorry, just really quick about Golang, and you said WebAssembly. I'm not familiar with WebAssembly, but what are the advantages of those two things?
Okay, so if you write your app in JavaScript, right, it's a interpreted language, right? So it's inherently slower than a compiled language. Well, Golang, in the case of WebAssembly, what you have the ability to actually compile it down into assembly code for the browser, and it's just much more it's much faster. And also, there are advantages of Golang over JavaScript, and that is much more strongly typed. And like there's, when you're developing a large complex application that has to be secure and defect-free, it's a lot easier, at least at this point in time, to work with like Golang as opposed to JavaScript. So a lot of this, at this point, JavaScript has advanced so much that like it's personal preference in many cases, but for us, it will hopefully allow us to build a web version of this without having to rewrite the server-side code. It can run there on mobile devices, and it can run in the web at no cost to speed. So, okay. So I talked a lot about what OpenBazaar is, but like why the hell should we care about this? Like why is this even important? I mean, we have Amazon, right? We have like, what is it, 90% of the world's commerce goes through Amazon or something? Like, well, this is where I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit instead of technology, which is that our world is changing really, really quickly. I mean, it's getting like pretty crazy out there. We're constantly, a barrage of like news content coming and hitting us with freedom of speech and like this person's being censored and this person, fake news, all this stuff, right? But the thing that we all do realize is that we still continue to use platforms that are centralized, where somebody is dictating what's going on to that server. Nobody has provided a very good alternative to that. And so we really have to like think about working on technologies that are going to help us make that a better situation for the future, right? Not worse. Like, let's not contribute to the issues that we already have at hand. These other businesses like have proven time and time again that they will always value their corporate interests or like be influenced by government or whatever because of legal reasons, whatever it is, and that affects our freedoms on the internet, right? And then the second extension of that is free trade. So we don't really think of having an issue here because Amazon has everything, right? Like it's just it's super simple for us. But a lot of countries can't even get onto Amazon. They can't even sell their goods on Amazon because the government or the economy there is really sketchy, and Amazon doesn't want to open their business there, or whatever the reason is. But in a lot of ways, that's not a good enough reason to like limit those communities from participating in global trade. We did a pilot in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, in 3 of the, you guess you could call them like slum areas. What we did is we went to their community centers and we set up OpenBazaar there. And local merchants that were building making different things that they normally had to sell on the street at like a really, really low cost for Argentinian pesos could sell their stuff on OpenBazaar to anybody. And so we had, like, for instance, we had this this guy who made like custom gaucho knives. They're like these like beautiful handmade knives, and he was selling them for like 30 cents or something in Argentina, right? But he was getting these Argentinian pesos, and the money was being devalued. So literally he would get 30 cents, and like by the afternoon it was only worth 25 cents. I mean, imagine that was like your whole life, your business is built on that, and the government was just causing the currency to be devalued. Instead, these people were selling these gaucho knives for like $15 plus shipping on OpenBazaar in Bitcoin, which was going up in value at the time, and they were just making tons. I mean, it changed, I can't say that like it changed Argentina. It was just a pilot. But if you extrapolate that concept worldwide, you can see how like much of an impact it could have. I mean, if you could, instead of being stuck in Venezuela, like with just basically your money's just like disappearing out of your hands because it's being devalued so much, instead hold all of your family's wealth in a stable store of value like Bitcoin. I mean, it could just impact your family for generations. This is an instance of where this is an issue, right? So this URL points to an article which up there in the red box you can see it says, "In support of free speech." Okay, so a company called Breitbart, which is like a conservative publication, opened up a Shopify store. They just wanted to sell Breitbart merchandise. But there was all this stuff coming out about how they were like, racist and alt-right and all this stuff. And so everybody was pressuring Shopify to shut them down, to shut their store down. Like, why would you let these guys operate on your business? And they published an article called "In Support of Free Speech" that outlined all the reasons why they would never never stop the freedom of speech, of people on the platform. Just because you're an alt-right guy doesn't mean you can't sell T-shirts on the platform.
I do have another question. It's like sort of related to this subject. So yeah, I have a question that's related to this subject, and I'm just kind of concerned. So it's kind of this whole like support free speech type things, right? I mean, I'm sure like we're all familiar with Rate My Professors, where say if we have submitted bad reviews to like any particular professor we had, and like we do our best to make sure we're not like undermining like what is like speak on is like teaching ability. And like there have been instances where I try to like at least write a negative review towards one professor I had, and but of course, like for some odd reason, it gets taken down because it doesn't follow the guidelines because they have a policy where it says like dudes should speak on professional ability and like don't undermine his racism or make any other insulting comments. I like did my best to make sure like that it follows the guidelines despite how I submit a negative review on it. But I'm just like we'll take one example. I think there's like this one professor where I just like asked, I don't know how he still teaches at this particular school. And, yeah, despite bad criticisms, because he's had a history of like having bad criticisms, and yeah, I just like asked myself how, and like they still took that down because like, they just find it offensive, is there like something like that? Or do you know the reason why they tend to like take those types of comments down? Or?
I mean, you have to think about it. I mean, ratemyprofessors.com. I mean, I don't know for sure because I haven't been on there since I was in college, but they probably have an advertising model, and they get pressure sometimes. Like advertisers are like, you got to remove this kind of content, or like, sometimes a good example is Yelp. I mean, we all use Yelp, but Yelp has always had a policy of like almost extorting merchants, stores, for like removal of their bad reviews. Like my father-in-law owns a deli in Virginia, and they constantly come to him and they're like, somebody posted a negative review of you. Would you like to remove it? Like for $250, we can like remove this negative review. And then there was this huge brouhaha about that they were doing this, and they said, okay, fine. We'll just make them really tiny at the bottom of the page, the bad reviews, the ones they pay to remove. We won't remove them. We'll just put them like you can't even see them. Like that's better, right? But see, all these kind of push and pull things like cause businesses to have to make difficult decisions. And so in this case, they ended up deleting the story because just 6 months later, someone was selling legally, they were selling weapons on Shopify store. But they were against gun violence. So they didn't care about the freedom of speech when it was just the alt-right, news publication. But then the guns, that was too much. And so they had to completely revoke their free speech thing. And it wasn't even illegal. It was like completely legal sales. They just didn't like the perception that they were supporting gun sales. And this is one of the quotes from their new article that they put out. Solely deferring to the law in this age of political gridlock is too idealistic and functionally unworkable on the fast-moving internet. He said this, and I completely agree with him. You can't do it. You can't try to build a business like this that supports freedom of speech but follows the law, because the laws have been written many, many years ago, and in many cases they don't even apply very well to the technology that we're building right now. And we're seeing that because now Twitter is like obviously like the biggest thing right now, right? Like everybody's always talking about Twitter because of like this whole situation. And I've met Jack, and I've had conversations with him. He's getting into crypto and stuff now. And like, I've also talked to some of his other co-founders like about this topic, and they refuse to like disclose anything about what they're doing. They're like working on it. They're always working on it. But the point is that CEOs steer company policies, right? Like, as a CEO, I dictate what happens at my company. And so if I have an ideological preference towards one thing or another, I can easily change that. I can make the policy on our platform follow that. And that's private companies are allowed to do that. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily. I mean, if it complies with everything you agree with. But if you're building a platform that's supposed to support freedom of speech or freedom of trade, there's this risk that this change of conviction can happen at any point. Now, this next slide was supposed to be a really big picture of this guy named Cody Wilson. I don't know if you guys know who Cody Wilson is. He's the CEO of a company called Defense Distributed. The 3D printed gun, if you ever heard about that on the internet, right? He's the guy who did that. And I was going to include that, but I decided to take it out because this week he was charged with statutory rape in Texas. And so I didn't really want to support that. But I do still want to talk a little bit about the defense distributed use case, which is that their business is being tested in the courts, and it was determined that they could legally sell these blueprints, these 3D blueprints, and unfortunately their businesses kept getting shut down, like their PayPal account got shut down or whatever. And this is a case where they were able to continue operating their business using Bitcoin and running their own business and payment system through Bitcoin. And so, from a personal perspective, you may have an opinion on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think if we're ever going to be challenging, any kind of legal issue around Second Amendment rights or anything contentious, it would be better for the people to have more power to be able to speak their voices and demonstrate what is right or wrong than to let companies decide for us. These are kind of the three pillars of decentralized markets: freedom, privacy, community. Freedom, not controlled by corporations or government. The users control this. Privacy, no middleman means communications are only between pertinent parties, right? So like when you buy something on Amazon, oh, they love it. They love it so much. When you talk to Alexa, they love it so much because they're capturing data about you. Now they can figure out what else to sell you. And they also they use it to like screw over their own merchants. I mean, Amazon Basics is like a way to like basically do research into their own merchants, find out what's selling really well because they see it all coming through their platform, and then they go, oh, well, iPhone chargers are really popular. Why don't we make a cheaper one and just put it at the top of the list as a Amazon preferred, And so now everybody's buying Amazon Basics instead of these other merchants who basically made Amazon popular. They just like continually do things that are more in the interest of the business rather than the users. And it's only going to get worse as they get bigger and bigger. I do love Amazon, by the way. I still use it, but I mean, it's the reality we live in. Community. The network is growing, and it gets innovated by the community and not driven by revenue or profit targets. Like every year, we're like, what's in the new iPhone? What's going to be in there? Like we all have ideas, but they just decide. They just pick and choose what gets put out. In an open source community, everybody is innovating, right? Like everybody's bringing ideas to the table. I outlined a couple of things that we were trying to pioneer with OpenBazaar in that previous slide. All that stuff came from the community. I mean, I had one of my co-founders came to me and was like, I've been thinking about, trustless marketplaces for 3 years. These are all my ideas. I got a contract system, all these things. I mean, that would never happen if we didn't have this open contribution community. So we're going to give the power back to the user. No one person or group can really properly police the world's commerce. We know that's obvious. Centralized companies are pressured politically to change the rules, and decentralized marketplaces can definitely empower users to decide their own rules and restrictions. Easier said than done, though. Okay, so I'm going to shift a little bit to talk about dApps in general. So does anybody have any questions kind of about what I brought up there? Sure.
I'm just curious, how would you respond to the argument that corporations are simply just a different classification of how individuals are grouped together? Essentially, like I know Elon Musk mentioned this on his interview with Joe Rogan, that basically corporations are just simply groups of people that serve to execute some particular function. Like how would you suggest that these users organize themselves?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. I don't have anything against corporations, first of all. I do think that corporations are a group of people that have a vested interest in having a successful outcome based on some idea, right? So there's nothing wrong with the fact that you say, I want to build a really cool electric car and we're going to make money from that. That's completely acceptable. I think that's completely acceptable. I think the problem lies in when we start creating products and services that are more like public utilities. Like you could argue that like Twitter should be a free and open source protocol. I mean, like, why does a company own one of the most widely used communications platforms that's used by our president to basically talk to the public? I mean, who knows if that's even all the stuff he put in there? We don't know that. It could be censored already or changed. So there's a difference, I think. And in this case, we need to have an alternative as an option to that, to that capitalistic approach. And I think, there's lots of experimentation going on, building things like a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. So it's the idea that we don't really care if there's like some one person controlling the organization. It's a group of people that have like some kind of agreement mechanism in place, and then we still all benefit from it, right? So like if we start an electric car company together as a DAO, we may not know who is even in the business. We just see, you know, part designs coming in and all this stuff, and then we all share in the profits that are based off, like, let's say, a token involved with that. And so we're getting rewarded for our hard work. It just doesn't mean that there's like some figurehead that controls the whole project. It's more decentralized, more distributed. So I don't know if that even came close to answering your question, but okay. Go ahead.
Do you think like loans and credit could work on like an anonymous, like decentralized network, like loans and credit? Like you can't be like sufficiently protected. Like can the lender be sufficiently protected?
Okay. So first, I think crypto-based loans is a little bit of an interesting topic because it's like a deflationary currency. So, you know, if you borrow money and it becomes more valuable later, you know, it's kind of like the reverse of like a normal loan situation. But anyway, the second thing is I think you're really hitting on is like reputation and trust when you don't know much about the parties involved. You know, like the escrow-based service is a way that we don't have to necessarily deal with the trust of a merchant. Like I don't have to know who you are necessarily because I'm guaranteed by cryptography and math that like I'm either going to get paid or you're going to lose your money. So that's one easy way of like solving the trust problem. But I think it's like a much more challenging thing than that. So there's more of a human element in most cases. So when it comes to like loans and stuff, I think, you know, we have to do a better job of creating reputation systems that are, once again, not centralized, right? Like so, like a decentralized Yelp could be like really useful, right? Like what if you wrote that review on ratemyprofessors.com and it went into like, it got pegged to the blockchain, let's say, and like it couldn't be removed. So now that review is protected essentially. So you could create more like trustworthy data store of like reviews and stuff. So like if somebody buys something from my OpenBazaar storefront, you know, they'd create a signed and encrypted contract between those parties, and it includes the review data. So you can't really dispute that. So, but that's just like the tip of the iceberg. And we actually funded there's a university in Athens. We funded a research study called Trust is Risk, which is really interesting. They have a really interesting white paper. It talks about how you can use Bitcoin for trust. So the general concept is that it's almost like you guys share a cookie jar, and like I don't want you to take my cookies, but I'll put a few in the cookie jar, and I know that I can trust you because you don't take it out of the cookie jar. If you take it out of the cookie jar, the trust rating gets destroyed, and it's all trackable through the blockchain. And so you have these circles of trust where like if all your friends are these people that took cookies out of the cookie jar, they have like a horrible reputation across the network, and they can see that through the graph. It's kind of complex, kind of crazy, but like these are the kinds of products that are being worked on in universities all across the world. Oh, sorry, I don't know if there are any more questions.
If OpenBazaar's entire goal is to be just a marketplace and not have a middleman and a simple decentralized concept, what's the business model for, I guess, paying bills as, you know, you have to develop business model?
Yeah, this is the question that comes up every time. Actually, I was asked this earlier. You asked me this like as soon as I got here. Yeah, it's a good question. So in 2015, when I started OB1 and we got funded, our investors said, okay, this sounds like really amazing that you guys might be able to like disintermediate Amazon or whatever in the future, but like how is it going to make money? And we're like, we don't know. We really don't know, because one of the core principles was that it was completely free and that it was never able to be hijacked and like charge fees or anything to users. And so we kind of created this kind of onion model where the center of this whole thing is OpenBazaar. It's a protocol. It's just owned by the users. It's completely free. But there will still be some kind of centralized services on top of this that are value added, right? Like merchant services, hosting, providing persistent data storage. Search is a really great example of that, right? Like Google did the same thing for the internet. It was a decentralized network, nobody controlled. They index the content, provide a good service on top, and then charge fees through that. So that was kind of our thing. And then the reason we justified that is because those services would be optional, right? Like users were not forced to pay the fees, but if they found those services compelling and valuable, that they would pay us for that. So that was the first idea. Now, in the years that have ensued, we've started to see token economic models come up where you're using tokens as an incentive structure within the network, and that's where you can start to generate value. And we're working on some ideas around, you can think of it as like a Google AdWords for crypto. So if you search bicycle within OpenBazaar, people can bid on that property for advertisement of their services and goods, and it used the token to do that. It would be completely controlled by a smart contract and completely controlled by the users. And anybody who owns those tokens, as the value of that ad network starts growing, they all share in the profits. So that's like one example of an economics model that would work for that. But the short answer is, we don't necessarily know. I mean, our investors are investing in this knowing that this is a 6 to 10 year probably cycle, and they're hoping that we'll explore and find something, but you never know. Okay, so dApps, decentralized apps. Now, this term has kind of been commandeered a little bit by just specifically Ethereum-based apps, but I classify it as all decentralized apps. Go ahead.
I've got a question about sort of like the trust thing, how the cookie jar thing.
Mm.
Could this kind of be like the credit score that we kind of have now? Like, is there like a Bitcoin credit card service analog that exists right now? Because I think that to me is the real trust.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different projects that are working on this, and they kind of are trying to be that role. There's a project called Civic, which is is like an identity, like a blockchain-based identity company. And so they're working with like governments actually to like create like this online digital ID that you own in the blockchain, and they want to tie things like maybe a digital credit score to that, or create some kind of personal reputation like that. And there's others out there that are doing this. With so many projects, which one is going to be the one? I don't know. It's probably too early to say. So, our perspective is we usually wait to see when there's like clear traction in an area, and then we start to work with them. So, for instance, like IPFS is not the excuse me. It's not the only company building like distributed file storage. There's like storage, made safe. There's all these different options, but we waited quite a while, and then we felt like that technology was the one that had the most traction. And so I don't know, in terms of like that case, I don't know what would win. We'll just have to see. I think we're still like really, really early on. How are we doing time-wise? Okay, hour. So dApps. So dApps is kind of this new thing. When we started OpenBazaar, we didn't call it a dApp. Nobody called anything dApps. This is like a new word that people made up, but it's kind of all the rage. And a lot of, even down to high school kids are starting to work on dApps because with the advent of Ethereum, we're starting to see like more tools for developers to get started. How many of you have programmed in Solidity or are familiar with it? Okay, so Solidity is like a smart contract language for Ethereum. It's like supposed to be real simple, and like you can build smart contracts on it. And so we're starting to see a lot of interest in this. And but I mean, one thing that I just want to talk about briefly is that decentralization once again is a spectrum. So how decentralized an application is or a dApp is can vary like dramatically. So here's an example of one. This is Bisq. So Bisq is a decentralized exchange. It's like a coin swap. Almost if you've ever heard of local bitcoins. So there's these listings for Bitcoin, and let's say you want to acquire it and you want to pay PayPal or pay in cash, or you give a gift card or something and get Bitcoin back. This platform, it's a decentralized app that allows you to find people to do that with, and it charges minimal fees. Okay, let me see. I don't know if it's on here, but yeah. So it uses a decentralized app approach to that, and it's cheaper. And you can also operate it completely anonymously. So if I go to localbitcoins.com and I want to sell some Bitcoin to you, even though if we just walked up on the street and I did that, that would be completely legal. If I did it through local Bitcoins, they have to go through know your customer laws. They have to take your social security number and your picture of your driver's license, store it in their proprietary database that hopefully they're protecting. And then they track all your transactions that you do on the platform, like how much money you exchange, all that stuff, right? This is completely private. You can even run it over Tor. I think it's Tor by default, actually. So you can do these trades completely privately. BISC doesn't it doesn't hold any of your fees. So like a local Bitcoins may hold that stuff in escrow, and if they decide to go out of business and take your money, you lost it. I think that's about it. So this is one example. This is IDEX. So IDEX is a dApp that's built on top of Ethereum, I hope. Yeah, Ethereum. And it's basically a complete exchange trading platform built on Ethereum. So all the logic for an order book and buying and selling is all built in like Solidity and smart contracts, and it runs on the Ethereum blockchain. And then the website is basically just like a viewer of what's happening on the blockchain. All the keys to your wallet is like in the browser, so it's not stored by any third party, and they charge a small fee for that. So the market taker pays 0.2%, market maker pays 0.1%, and this is probably, I think it's either the or second most used application on Ethereum right now. OpenSea. So OpenSea is a digital asset marketplace. Who's familiar with digital assets? You guys know what that is? Okay, so digital assets are basically like, think about trading cards, right? Like you have a trading card, you know it's a certain rarity, you know, it could be worth different amounts, but you have one of 300 cards, all right? So now this is the digital version of that. So, you know, they're created using something called non-fungible tokens. A fungible item is an item that can be exchanged one for one, like a dollar is a dollar is a dollar. There's no dollar special, right? Like this dollar, I can just swap it, you don't care, you got a dollar. But a non-fungible token would be a token that is only owned by one, and it's provably owned by one person. It can't be replicated. So if you own this, this is Ethereum, like Ethereum. It's like Pokemon on Ether. If you own these, you literally own them. It's like property almost. So you can buy and sell all these digital goods, and they have tons of different ones. Like Major League Baseball just has an app now. You can buy like different players and trade them. So OpenSea is a marketplace that allows you to sell and buy all these digital assets. You can buy over 60 different digital assets. CryptoKitties. Who's heard of CryptoKitties? Wow, still very few. You guys are all computer science people? You guys got to start reading Wired magazine more. So CryptoKitties, Decentraland, Ethereum, those are examples. The Major League Baseball one. These guys take 2.5% fee for every sale, which is quite a bit actually. That's almost close to a credit card transaction fee. And it uses a piece of software called MetaMask to manage identities, and it's like a wallet. So, so the reason why I brought this one up is like, in terms of decentralization, it relies on a couple components that seem decentralized at first, but are not necessarily decentralized. So MetaMask, when you use OpenSea, they ask you to download the MetaMask plugin, and it's your wallet, and it's completely decentralized. But what most people don't know is MetaMask talks to a centralized server called Infura that like 80% of Ethereum apps use. That's pretty centralized to me. Like if that goes down, you know, what are you going to use? So you know, and then also OpenSea is at OpenSea.io or something website. That's a website run by somebody. If that goes down, it's gone. So it's not as decentralized as say BISC. And then here's CryptoKitties. If you want to try a dApp that's kind of funny and clever and you never have, you could try out, just Google CryptoKitties and check it out. You can basically buy digital cats. And the cats are represented by basically an integer in the blockchain. That's their genetic code, is this integer. And each one is unique and can only be owned by one person at any given time. And the game is written in a smart contract, which allows these cats to breed. So you could take two of these together that are owned by two different people and create a completely different digital cat. They have generations, and they can get more rare, and they become more valuable. One of the CryptoKitties was bought by Mike Novogratz, who's like a hedge fund manager. He bought it for $140,000, one CryptoKitty. Yeah. I think it's like way down in price right now, so he's probably not feeling too happy about that purchase, but he did. And this is an example of something called an ERC 721, which is basically a standard for something called Nifties, which are non-fungible tokens. And the reason why these marketplaces can sell all these different types of digital assets is because they all conform to this policy of an ERC 721. You can read it. It's a very short document. It outlines exactly what a Nifty has to do in order to be compliant. And so people are creating it. Another area where a standard like this has really succeeded is ERC 20, which is tokens. So everything that you hear about, like ICOs, people buying tokens and token sales, ICO sales, all those are just complete copies of the same standard, ERC 20. They all have identical functionality, and you can crank them out. And it really exploded the ability to do crowd sales by having that standard created. And then the final example here is Augur. So this one gets to be really interesting in terms of freedom of speech. So what Augur is, it's a prediction marketplace. It allows you to make so-called gambles about different events. And then people are able to use the token that they have in order to validate that an outcome happened. They're like oracles, so to speak. And so someone could go in here, because it's completely decentralized and censorship resistant. They could say, I think Barack Obama is going to die next year, yes or no, and start that market. And people can bet on it or not. In fact, they can do all kinds of stuff, like with sports, politicians. They can do it on any time scale they want. Anything can be done. In fact, when they launched just a few months ago their first version, I bet on a World Cup game, and the minimum bet was it was like $100 or something of Ether. And so the first version, I tried to make the bet on the World Cup game, and it had some kind of quirk, the bug. It didn't look like it worked, and I was hitting it a couple times. And then it said, congratulations, you made a $2,000 bet on the World Cup game. So I really needed them to win. It's a hell of a bug to have in your software on day one. But I did win it. And so I was able to win $1,600 off of this bet, off this World Cup game. And it was completely quick, seamless. As soon as the game was over, it was validated. It paid out into my wallet, and that's how it goes. And people are continuing to make different bets on the marketplace. It uses a token in order to create reputation. So we were talking about reputation models earlier, about how different ways you could do that. In this instance, people who it requires. I told you I haven't talked this long. It requires third-party people to come in and validate that something happened, right? Like a computer can't just know that the Cubs won the World Series. Someone has to validate that. And so people who hold rep tokens can use those tokens and say, yes, the Cubs won, and they put it down. And when the consensus period ends, the losers, the ones who didn't validate correctly, lose their tokens, and the ones who win get paid a bonus fee for that. And as their bonus, their stake of rep tokens goes up, their reputation becomes higher. So it's kind of a clever way to gain reputation naturally. So the reality is, and go ahead.
Sorry, I was curious, what are your thoughts on Augur and the proliferation of assassination markets?
My feeling is that I think the assassination market concept is just an overblown concept in most cases. I think they could exist and probably would have existed very broadly on Tor and in the darknet if that was going to happen. There was a study done maybe 2 years ago, I think, where they tried to investigate some of these claims that there were assassination markets out and hits on people were placed, and they just couldn't find any evidence at all that these things were even happening. So I think a lot of it is kind of like an overblown question. But Fortune wrote a magazine article about us, and it was titled, I believe, OpenBazaar may be the most dangerous startup ever created. I was like, okay, is that a good thing or a bad thing? But as you read on, the guy starts talking about the fact that like at some point in the future, maybe we have, artificial intelligence is getting so smart that it's firing up its own assassination markets, and it's like hiring people with Bitcoin, and it's just like running on its own. And like, protocols like what we're building with OpenBazaar, like maybe we're facilitating that future, right? Like we're just setting robots up to be able to do this stuff on their own. That Elon Musk interview, I mean, he talks about that kind of thing happening. He's very nervous about artificial intelligence. I mean, we don't know where that's going. It's going fast. And we're building these networks that are, basically it's indistinguishable if a computer is doing something versus if a human's doing it. But, in general right now, dApp usage is extremely small. I mean, we're talking about around 10,000 active users per day on all of the Ethereum dApps, which is most of the market. 10,000 users. And there's like 1.4 billion active users on Facebook, right? And that's just one regular app. We have a long way to go. And in terms of people who actually hold crypto in a wallet, it's like in the low millions. And there's over 7 billion people in the world. So it can get really big. I mean, the future is a green field for sure. Market cap of cryptos right now is only $200 billion. Super tiny. But interest in dApps is growing. So this is a Google trend chart on dApp, the word dApp, which is pretty unique. And you can see this huge curve is kind of when the ICO boom happened. And then we're kind of in a lower frame. But you can see it's almost, what is that? That's like 22 to 50. It's like basically a doubling of interest in a few months. So, and in terms of developer growth, I mean, there's conferences and programs in different universities on building dApps and stuff. It's like, it's proliferating. I remember just 3 years ago, they were hailing this one program in Greece. It was like the first and only blockchain program. And now there's tons. There's a couple universities that are completely dedicated to it. Okay. So this section, I'm going to quickly talk about designing and architecting dApps. So you guys, a lot of you are developers, or most of you are developers, and you may want to build your own dApp. So like, what are some of the things you got to think about when you're building your own dApp? There's obviously platform decisions, like how do you come to those, and what is kind of out there? How do you get a development team together if you're just one person who wants to work on one of these things and it requires this contributor base to get grown? Community building. How do you make your users happy? How do you keep them excited? How do you incorporate their feedback in order to make your dApp better? User experience, something people overlook. A lot of engineers like to overlook user experience, right? We want to code and make things work and make it beautiful, but the user experience may not be it may not be nice. It might not work very well for your users. And then governance is a huge and important part. How do you, if there's no one person to kind of make the final call on a decision, how do you move forward? How do you change things as time goes on? Even when it comes down to we found a huge defect or a flaw in our code, who's going to write the solution? Who's going to merge it into the code? All these things are part of a governance process. Technology decisions. The main 3 decisions I think that you have to think about before you really start getting deep into it is your blockchain choice. So different blockchains obviously offer different capabilities. Ethereum is basically the world's computing computer. You can use it as basically everybody's processing all these contracts for everybody else. Whereas Bitcoin has got a very minimal scripting language and is really used mostly for payment transfers. So there's a big difference there. In terms of scalability, there's a lot of issues. I mean, people want to use Ethereum, but CryptoKitties single-handedly, when they were popular, clogged up the entire blockchain. No one could even send money because people were trying to buy and sell CryptoKitties. I mean, that's one app with 20,000 users. It doesn't seem very scalable to me. So that could be a big concern. And spam is a huge problem on that network as well. Data storage. If you're going to decentralize something, the biggest challenge here is where are you going to put the data then, right? If you put it all on Amazon in the cloud, or you put it on Google Cloud, like it's there. Like Google could just say, oh yeah, this dApp is going to do an assassination marketplace and wipe it all out, right? And that could be like sensitive user data or application data. So what do? You have to build networks like IPFS. That's one option. You have to, you could store all of it in the blockchain like Ethereum does. Different models, different solutions. And then networking. Like networking can be a very important choice in how you build your dApp. If you don't really care about, like if you're just selling digital cats and you have a very low risk application, then you may feel comfortable starting CryptoKitties.com and everybody interacts through that website. And it's somewhat proprietary and closed source. Depends on what you want to do. Development teams. Open source development, these are kind of 3 different approaches I've seen. Open source development is like what we do and what Bitcoin and Ethereum do. You basically have a bunch of volunteers that aren't really, they just have a vested interest in making sure the product succeeds, not necessarily for one thing. And sometimes they have these loosely affiliated foundations that get stood up, like the Ethereum Foundation, the Bitcoin Foundation. Closed source development, private blockchains. So a lot of like enterprise companies and big banks and stuff are starting to build and test out these private blockchains. They feel like public blockchains are too revealing, or they may fly in the face of like regulatory requirements. So like banks, they can't just like dump all their customers' transactions onto the blockchain, even if it's pseudonymous, right? Like they can't do that legally. So it's not even a choice to use a public blockchain. So now they've started to explore using private blockchains, which they run themselves. And that may be viable for them. Like they don't care. The people that use that blockchain they trust, and so they don't have to worry about it like Bitcoin does. So that's one option. And you may see that if you guys take jobs at larger enterprises and they do blockchain work, you may be looking at a private blockchain. And then a hybrid approach. So like I talked about, CryptoKitties is kind of a hybrid approach. Like all those cats are custom artwork that CryptoKitties, the company, owns. They own the artwork. The only thing you own is that integer that I stated that you have a key for on the blockchain. That's it. You don't own the artwork. It's just a number you own. So there's this kind of like hybrid approach to that, and they don't think that matters too much because it's just a game. Communities are really I don't know what to recommend to you on how to start a community. I think things that would improve your prospects of building a good community around your idea is really having an idea that's unique and ambitious, and actually provides some value. So many of us are seeing companies that are like, I built a really cool scooter and we're going to put it on the blockchain, or carrots on the blockchain. There's just stupid ideas like that. It doesn't provide any kind of added value. And so, I challenge you, if you're coming up with something like that, is try and think about things that could like really help society, that are difficult to do in a centralized way. Choose a landing spot for communication. There's all kinds of different ways that people approach this, but I would recommend finding one really good place to be and just building it out from there. There's a lot of success in Slack, Discord, and Telegram groups. That's used a lot in like Asia. And then social media, really building up your social media presence and like talking to people. This community is like, it's really unique in that everybody's super approachable. It's fairly humble in most of the developer communities. There are obviously some investors that are a little bit crazy, but there's just so many really great minds in this space. I mean, I've met the creator of JavaScript. He runs a company called Brave. It's a crypto company, crypto browser. It has a token. Had many conversations about that. Like I said, I met the founder of Twitter. I mean, there's all kinds of people in the space. Bram Cohen, who invented BitTorrent. He's doing his own blockchain. I mean, it's just like every really good mind in computer science is kind of also thinking about this, or is like somewhat like got their feet in there. And so it's like a very promising technology. And then good documentation. I can't tell you how important that is. I mean, like, I'm sure your professors tell you that stuff when you're coding, documentation, but it really sucks when you're working on an open source project and you can't understand what's going on, especially when it's so complex. And we struggle with that as well. And then go to meetups or start your own. I ran the Northern Virginia, DC Bitcoin meetup for 2 years. And we grew it from like 4 people meeting in like a restaurant to like a room like this. Just people couldn't even get in the door to talk about stuff. I mean, it can go. There's just so many people that are passionate about this and want to get started. And you know, you can find jobs that way, different connections, projects. So go to meetups, check it out. Another big important part is user experience. This is a picture of our mobile app right now. So there's kind of 4 areas. You know, easy to use UI. I mean, crypto is a complicated thing already that most people don't understand. Like, you use some of these apps, it's just like impossible to understand what's going on in them. You want it to be responsive. Like I said, like decentralized search is not a good option if you want your app to be responsive. I had so many complaints about people saying, oh, I can't search for anything. You can't just be like, but it's decentralized, you know, so what, wait. No, users don't care, they're like gone already. Security, you're working with money or financial data or like digital assets. You don't want to build a piece of software where like you make a bug and then like it wipes out $1 million worth of some guy's tokens. You're going to have very unhappy users trying to find your home location if you do that. And that is a very real threat. Support and documentation. You know, help your users out by providing strong support and good documentation. Strong support. Those communities, those Slack, Discord, those places are good forums to discuss problems and like work through them and find things that you wouldn't have known if you didn't talk to your users. Governance. So these are some of the questions that you're going to have to be able to answer. Who controls the protocol? Is it you? Is it a group of people? Like, you know, what's the process? Who controls the network? Is it miners, or do miners have like an undue influence on the network? Is it the developers? Who controls the network? Who are the developers? Are they all anonymous? Are they people that are backed by other groups? What's their interest? Who are their investors? I mean, a lot of these tokens are taking on really big investors that have, you know, very deep pockets. How are changes decided? How are vulnerabilities and defects handled? Bitcoin this week had a pretty big bug that came out, and you know, everybody got very like upset about, you know, the developers being criticized for this bug, and so they played it down, and then later in the week it was turned out that there was like, it was basically a mandatory fix for like all people on Bitcoin. Like, it was much more serious than they initially thought. So, you know, this is a result of bad defect resolution. And in governance also, who benefits? Like, if you're building a marketplace, are you going to take a fee? Or are you not going to take a fee? If you take a fee, who does the fee go to? Coins like Zcash built in a reward in their mining system that rewards the developers, the core developers. At first, that seems modest. I think it was like $1,000 a month for like the lead developer reward. And then after the crypto boom, he was making $221,000 a month as a reward. And a lot of people who work and contribute to it were not getting that reward. And that sucks for them, right? I mean, that creates a big governance issue. Like, people get upset. They want to change it. They want to fork the code. These things can come up really quickly. Another really bad example is Tezos. They had a foundation. They raised $200 million in an ICO. The foundation controlled the funds, but not the developers. And then the foundation said they weren't giving them the money. So now they went into a big lawsuit, and they wasted like a year of development time because all the money was locked up, and there was just a huge issue. So governance is super important. Okay, so this is like the final section of my presentation. So what I wanted to quickly do is just kind of show you and use this as like a wonderful plug for my dApp to show you how simple it is to do an OpenBazaar dApp. If you have your computer and you want to, you can probably follow along. It's not going to be something super challenging. Set up your own storefront. I'm going to attempt to try and make a purchase. We'll see if that can happen. And then I can tell you a little bit about what you can do if you want to keep going past that in terms of exploring OpenBazaar. So, all right. So I want to switch over to the computer. So this is, let's see. So this is OpenBazaar.com. So openbazaar.com is our .com website. Our .org website is where you go to find the community stuff and download the source code and do all that. The .com is eventually going to be the web version of our marketplace. Right now, what this is it's sort of a read-only view of the marketplace. So this is all live from the peer-to-peer network, but it's you can't buy or sell on it yet. You can really just explore the marketplace and search for things and find things. So, so we have a trading section here, which allows you to like trade altcoins. So if you want to sell, like the top listing is XMR for BTC. This is kind of small. Maybe you guys can't see it in the back. So XMR is Monero. So this guy's selling Monero for $122.92 a Monero, which is the market price. This red one, this guy's selling it 500% above market. But it's a complete decentralized exchange. You just pay Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin. They'll give you Dogecoin or ETH instantly through the app. So that's one capability we have. Oh, openbazaar.com. I will give a caveat ahead of time. I think I'm in not suitable for work mode, but this is an open marketplace, so I'll go to like a more benign category here. Okay, so this is an example of like physical listings under the crypto heading. So you can buy all these different products basically with crypto. We have digital goods and services. So if you want to sell like you want to be a programmer for $50 an hour, you can offer your services here and pay through there. And then digital goods, like let's say, I don't know, you want to send them World of Warcraft gold or something for Bitcoin, you can sell it there as well, or like a ebook or something like that. And then, so you can see, let's see. So this is what it would look like kind of in the app too. So you have all this information about it. It's just like a regular e-commerce site. All this stuff is being stored on IPFS on like a bunch of different computers over the peer-to-peer network. You can see shipping info, return policy, all that. Pretty standard like e-commerce experience. But you'll see in this case, buy it now doesn't work because we haven't finished the web version. So we're still working on that. But you can download the OpenBazaar client and open it directly in there. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. So let's say I want to buy that on OpenBazaar. It takes you to the download page. You can choose. We support Linux, Windows, and Mac. In this case, I'm on a Mac. So download it. Now, essentially, it's a web app wrapped in a desktop application. But moving to the web is a very challenging thing. In terms of data storage. So some storefronts can have 100,000 items in them with photos and storage. Storing that in the browser is a problem, but it's a DApp, and so there is no website to send it to. So those are kinds of problems we're working on. So you get OpenBazaar, pretty simple, install. And hopefully this all works as expected. So one thing to note is like, when it comes to e-commerce, this is still, like, from a user experience perspective, this is not great, right? Like, if I just want to buy that t-shirt that I clicked on or whatever, I should be able to pay for it right through the website. Like, why do I have to download an app? Like, we understand that. This is kind of the first stage of, like, bringing dApps mainstream, because browsers are not really built currently with the idea that peer-to-peer networks is how people interact with the web. It's client-server right now. So like WebRTC, for instance, is a technology that allows browsers to talk to each other. But in our testing, a couple hundred connections over WebRTC crashes every major browser. So it's already like not a good option. So that technology is still very new, and we're working through that stuff. Let's see. Oops, I think that's the old version. Hold on. Stop, go away. We're also working on a mobile version. Mobile presents a whole nother set of challenges for anybody building a dApp because of the app stores. The app stores are centralized, and there's really no way around it. So you can't, if you're going to set up an assassination marketplace, it's not going to go through the app store guidelines, you know? It's not going to pass. So, you know, that presents a whole nother challenge of getting these kinds of dApps onto mobile devices. Coinbase, which is a huge company in Bitcoin space, probably one of the few unicorns right now in the $1 billion valuation range, was selling, allowing people to sell CryptoKitties and stuff within their app. Apple said, hey, we want our cut of that decentralized asset, and they couldn't do it, so they ended up having to remove that feature from that. That immediately removes a whole potential market of technology. Okay, I don't think I can make it zoomed in. Oh, maybe I can, yeah. All right. So in our case, you get 3 different wallets to choose from. So this is going to change soon so that you can run all of them at the same time. But right now, you have to choose one. So I'm going to just choose Bitcoin. So what's happening on the back end of this is that your identity is being generated, your Bitcoin wallet is being created, and it's connecting to the network and setting up your IPFS stuff. So hopefully this works. The server is written in Golang, and this interface is written in JavaScript. It talks to the server, or it's supposed to. So you can already see that dApps can have like a very, you know, when there's a problem, it can be a complex problem. Like it should work seamlessly, like that should have just started up immediately, but it didn't. So you get to see the nuts and bolts of this kind of thing. So what's really going on behind the scenes is there's like a bunch of scripts that start up like the server in the background. So I think this might be the first time I ever have run this like live in front of an audience. Oh, okay, I see what's going on. I'm going to violate this. You should never do this. Oh, forgot. Different user. Okay. Okay. I've never used multi-user in OS X, but I have another account going, so sorry, I got to switch over. I think OpenSea is running on the other machine, or the other user account. Let's see. Okay, well, I'll just show it to you from here. Oh, is this one not working either? Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is one of my stores. So the home page is basically looks like this. It looks kind of like the .com. You can search for stuff. Up at the top, there's a couple search providers. So just to give you an idea of like how different things can be, let's see if this works. Oh, okay. So this is another guy's search of the web, right? So there's just different kinds of stuff here. But if you were to search on this guy's search engine, you could find bad stuff. On ours, we filter stuff. These are different views. And you can hit this plus sign, and you can add different search providers that people have, and you can find them on the web that search all kinds of different stuff. So it's kind of a wild, wild west, but the users are kind of given the freedom to choose. So this is my page. I have 2 listings for sale. Your store is automatically created. You get a profile, so you can update your page however you want, and put social links on the stuff to like for reputation, your shipping addresses, all these different things, and set up your page. In order to sell something, you just have to click listing, and there's different kinds of things you can do. So you can choose digital goods or whatever. Like if you want to sell cryptocurrency, we have like over 1,600 cryptocurrencies you can sell from. You just pick whichever one you want, and then you can choose how much of a reward you want to get on top of it, and describe, add pictures, all this stuff. So what happens is if I hit save after I create a listing, it gets published to the IPFS network. So what that means is it's not just sitting on my computer, and it doesn't go off to like one single server. It goes out to the network, and it goes out to like different participants on there. There's different nodes that cache it across the network. So instead of having to run a server all the time like a website, I can turn off my computer, and people can still buy stuff from my store. So that when I come back on and I open up the website, it syncs up with the network, and my orders and everything are still there. And so I can like process offline payments that way. Yes. Yeah, you can use these different search engines.
So, but like, what does that mean exactly?
Okay.
You said you can use the other users' search engines?
So we have a standard that we wrote for search providers. It basically says if I give you this word, then you return the results in this format. So the app knows how to interpret that and show it in the search results based on that. But anybody can set it up. So you can download like our demo crawler. It crawls the network, stores the data, and then you just have to write the API that conforms to that spec, and then anybody can add your search engine to the browser. So eventually, that'll be really cool for search providers because we're going to tie in reward systems. So like if I use your search engine and I click on this bottle of whatever and I buy it, that there may be an affiliate fee for the search engine, and they start generating revenue that way. So that allows anybody to make money off of the OpenBazaar system, not just us. Yeah, so let me see. So buying stuff is pretty simple. So like built into the app, there's a wallet here. So you can see I have 0.003 Bitcoin in here, and these are all the transactions that happen. And I could use it as a regular Bitcoin wallet. I could send to a Bitcoin address an amount and put a note in there, and off it goes. So it's a completely fully functioning Bitcoin wallet in here. That's where your funds go if you're a merchant and you sell stuff. And you can also ask people to send you money, and so you can use it like a normal wallet. We also have like chat. So these are all like, you can have encrypted chat with people. So like if like this guy had a problem, he didn't get my order or whatever, so I could send him Monero and we could talk through the chat and everything. That's like really useful. A lot of the merchants and customers talk to each other and hash things out, especially because I think we have users in 192 countries using it. So it's like, sometimes it's kind of confusing to understand what's going on. And you can talk with them directly. And yeah, so and then there is this moderation system, which I can't show you in this part. But so if you trying to think, if you bought something and you had a problem, there's like a big red button. You can dispute it, and then it kicks out like a group chat between you and the dispute resolution person and the merchant, and you guys can like hash it out and provide evidence or whatever to determine what happened. And then that third party can choose to give all the money back to the buyer or give it to the merchant or split it however they want. And then they get a fee for helping out with that. So that's another way that people can organically earn money on the platform. So like I'll show you real quick. So when you're in your settings, you can, let's see. You can set a moderation. So like you don't even have to be a merchant or a buyer on the platform. You could just be helpful and like do dispute resolution. So you could turn it on. You can charge price per dispute, put your terms and service in there, and then you're now on the network as someone who can help out and charge a fee. And there are people that earn money each month by helping people fix problem transactions and like work through problems and stuff. And let me see. Oh, and then so this is kind of the interface for how you would pick. So you can see down here there's a bunch of these options down here, and then you can look at their profiles and stuff and decide who you want to add to your list of trusted moderators. So I have just one here, and he charges 10% straight fee on whatever you do. So this is pretty much the app in a nutshell, but you know, there is no registration process. When you run the app the first time, it creates your identity, you're on the network, you're live. All you have to do is add a listing to your store, which takes a few minutes, and you have a fully functioning crypto store up for sale that anybody can get to. And when you go to OpenSea.com, you can link to that as well. You can find stuff there, like whatever somebody's, your store will have a link there, and you can share that on social media, and then people can come here and find OpenBazaar that way. And then eventually, when we have the mobile apps and the web version, you'll be able to just buy it directly from the website. And so there's no cost to run this. You don't have to run a virtual host somewhere in the cloud and run your WooCommerce or Shopify. You don't have to pay a monthly fee. All your information is yours. Your order information is only stored with you and the customers that you work with. And all your money is in crypto in your wallet, it's secured. So that's pretty much it with the app. And that's generally all I wanted to talk about today, but I'd be glad to answer some more questions or anything if people want.
Can we report listings? Like, if it seems dubious?
Yeah, of course. So this is part of the standard, the search standard. Now, search providers can provide a reporting capability or not. It's up to you. So like in our case, we do. So we have this flag. And so you can like report this. And this goes out to like our search engine people, and then they can remove stuff. And in fact, we get that often. We get DMCA claims or whatever, and we can remove them, or people flag fraudulent stores and stuff like that. But it's up to the merchant, or up to the search engine to provide that. So, yeah.
Do you guys have any other like competitors also using peer-to-peer to like sell stuff, or are you guys like the first and only ones?
I would be lying if I said any of them were like serious competitors, just because they haven't gotten much traction. We're still pretty small ourselves, but there's one called Syscoin. It's a Syscoin marketplace, I believe. There's another one called Phore, Phore, which is like a fork of ours, and they're doing a different thing. There's a couple different models, but not many. Yeah, there's a lot of work being done on some to try and create an Ethereum specific one, but that wouldn't accept Bitcoin or any of the other coins. It would just be Ethereum based. So, but yeah, there's not much out there really.
So you mentioned a couple times the issue of decentralized searching. Like, how is the searching implemented right now, including like the API for other developers?
Okay, so I'll show you. So I'll toggle these developer tools so you can see what's going on. So if I search for cats, this URL, it says search.ob1.io. So in the background, it's hitting a third-party centralized search engine API. And then it will send back, where is it? Yeah, okay, well, this is not a very good format, but you can see it's returning like a JSON object of all the results for the search engine. And it is all like a complex schema that tells the app exactly what to do. So like when you contact the search engine, it chooses all these. So like you notice these like filters and options and stuff over here. That's different if you clicked on this guy, you get some different options. So he like does like minimum sales amount, which we don't do for our search engine. But all that can be presented automatically from the API, and then the client understands how to portray it here and filter the results and everything. So it's all like, so anybody can build their own thing. There was one guy who built a custom search engine, and he like pissed off a lot of people because he called the coins like crap coin and all this stuff, and the people were like, they were mad at us because they thought we called it crap coin, but it was a third-party search engine. And like people, like it's very hard for people to wrap their heads around the idea that like it's not just like I'm not the one putting that stuff on there. Like the users are putting stuff onto the network, but they don't know any different. Yeah. So any other questions? Okay. Well.
Is OB1 accepting internships?
We're always open for hiring and internships. We had an internship this summer that went well, and we actually extended her a full-time offer. So yeah, we're definitely open for that.
How do you guys navigate around
So it's complex. Obviously, as a company, we have lots of lawyers and legal representation that can help us when we have issues, and from time to time we do. We had like the FBI reach out once, and so there was like some questions around, like they want to know how it works. They want to know what kind of data we store about people, and so those kinds of questions tip you off as to like what is a problem, right? Like they want to know if you're storing this kind of data. Are you facilitating these trades? Are you monetizing that? Are you making money off of a drug deal that happens on your platform? All those questions have to be answered. In our case, we're purely providing source code for a client that people run individually as their own business, right? So it's like selling e-commerce software and you run it on your own computer, essentially. Now, places where that's not true, like the search engine, like so if I'd typed in marijuana or something and then that hit our server and then this guy went to a transaction and bought something and we had that on our server somewhere, yeah, that could be a problem. And so that's why we have like the reporting feature for us, because we filter out anything that's illegal according to like US law or whatever. Or we try our best to do that, and we respond to requests for takedowns and things like that. But others don't necessarily. So we can't stop what happens on what gets put onto the network. So like you said, why don't you just you could just block gun sales or something, right? That's not really true, because it's like setting up your own website. I can be a dummy and just set up a website on my home computer and start selling drugs, and then they'll find me and they bust me. It's the same thing here. So if I put a bunch of listings for sketchy stuff, I mean, if they find my IP address, they're going to come and get me. They'll shut your computer down, your store will disappear off OpenBazaar, and then everybody else moves on unscathed. So our approach is basically like a hands-off approach. We try to provide users tools that let them filter and create the view of the network that they want. But just like the internet, there's a whole the unindexed net that Google doesn't index, the dark net or whatever you want to call it. That exists on the internet. It's not like a special place. It's just decentralized search engines don't catalog it. And for most people, that is the internet. They go to Google, that's how they find things. So it's the same way here. They may search for marijuana and on our search engine never find it, so they assume it doesn't exist there. But it could. It could be somewhere else. It just could be unindexed. Yeah. I don't know who was first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just not seeing it clearly. But is there really a big incentive for people like developers to make their own search engines? I mean, do we get or even other users to use any other search engine besides the open ones?
I think in this instance, it's not necessarily a great setup for incentive. It's not set up very well for incentives for the search engine providers. Yeah, it's more of like an experimental thing to work on. But like I said, we are working on a token that will be integrated very deeply into that process. There are smart contracts where there'll be ad auctions and things like that that will get incorporated into search engine in the next few months, and then they'll be able to monetize that. So if they're driving more search results, and there are definitely people that do not like our search engine. They're too strict. They want to be on the other one, and they use it a lot. So there's definitely opportunity for other search engines to do that. But where I see long-term really shining is that people will create separate marketplace UIs that focus on certain niches. So it may be like gaming digital goods. It could be clothing-specific storefronts, whatever. And then they will need their own search engine. So it's a more complex thing. But you're right, there's kind of minimal incentive right now to run another search engine. That's why we only have 2 out of the box. There are a couple others, but not very good. And then your question?
Yeah, so you said like whenever anyone has some sort of flagged search and it gets pinged back to your server, it ends up like, I guess, being flagged. Do you only have servers in the US or do you have any outside of like the country? And how do you end up managing the legal aspects for that? Do you go with the law both in the US or in the law of the server country? I mean, in the country where you host the server.
All of our search technology is on Amazon right now for our company. So it's all like East Coast, West Coast. I mean, it's spread across, but it's all US-based Amazon right now.
This is sort of a general question, but what do you think is, for like software developers and engineers, is there anything available in the blockchain space to work on that isn't necessarily a dApp?
Well, I mean, obviously the blockchains themselves. I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in different areas. There's so many blockchain projects being worked on right now too, but a lot of people find getting involved with like the bigger projects like Bitcoin Core and stuff like that to be very, very challenging. There's a very high bar of excellence to get involved with those things, and so most beginners start to do documentation or bug reports or something like that to start out. But you know, obviously, working on that kind of stuff is really popular right now too. I'm not sure, like, other than dApps, what else? I mean, a lot of people work on like wallets. A guy I know started a project building the point of sale terminal that supports crypto. Another one was he's doing a bills service. So like you, let's say you want to pay your bills in Bitcoin. So someone else will agree to pay your electric bill for you, and then you pay them in Bitcoin, and so it facilitates that trade. So there's a ton of different ideas that are not necessarily just dApps. The reason I focus on dApps is because obviously we're building one, but dApps are the most extreme implementation of crypto, right? Like they're just completely decoupled from the current power structure. And so that's why I find them the most fascinating. Yeah.
We'll take one more question if anyone has one.
Okay, awesome.
Could you give another round of applause to Brian for coming on stage?
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Yep, and here's your swag bag.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you for coming, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
We can